Well, hello everyone and welcome. I am Jose Red, founder of Thrive for Wellness and community care expert for SMI Advisor. I am pleased that you are joining us for today's SMI webinar. The topic is practical approaches to identify, develop, and support leaders in the mental health workforce. SMI Advisor, also known as the Clinical Support System for Serious Mental Illness, is an APA and SAMHSA initiative devoted to helping clinicians implement evidence-based care for those living with serious mental illness. Working with experts from across the SMI clinical community, our interdisciplinary team has been designated to help you get the answers you need for the care of your patients. Next slide, please. Next slide, one more. Today's webinar has been designated for 1 AMA PRA Category 1 credit for physicians, 1 continuing education credit for psychologists, and 1 continuing education credit for social. Credit for participating in today's webinar will be available until August 6th of 2024. Next slide. Slides from the presentation today are available to download in the webinar chat. Just select the link to view. Next slide. Captioning for today's presentation is also available. Click Show Captions at the bottom of your screen to enable. Click the arrow and select View Full Transcript to open the caption in the slide window. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation by typing them in the question area found in the lower portion of your control panel. We'll reserve 10 to 15 minutes towards the end for some Q&A. By participating in this activity, you agree to the terms and conditions for the APA activities, including the APA participation policy, private policy, and terms of use. Next slide. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's faculty, Ms. April Hall. April Hall is a licensed clinical professional counselor in Chicago. She is also the Associate Director of Behavioral Health at Esperanza Health Center. She was drawn to Esperanza by the opportunity to give back to the Southside community through quality, multicultural, and bilingual services. She is passionate about professional development, and prior to Esperanza, April was a behavioral health therapist and advocate for Children Pediatric Development Center. Thank you, April, for leading today's webinar. We're really excited to hear what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I want to start off by saying, in terms of disclosures, I have no relationships or conflicts of interest related to the subject matter of this presentation. All right, the learning objectives for today. I'm hoping that upon completion of this activity, participants will be able to identify talent and intrinsic motivation needed to really develop those leadership qualities within your organization and specifically in your team. Design training that encourages that growth, confidence, and independence for mental health leaders in management, strategy, and especially conflict resolution. And also assess mental health leaders' performance based on their team's quality, engagement, and efficiency. So starting off with just the mental health workforce in general. Healthcare workers are seen as a group with a very special set of working conditions. Being a part of a system that requires so many different skill sets has benefits and definitely some challenges associated with it, especially when we speak about severe mental illness and just the different levels of care needed by the population that we serve, but also by staff and just team members that we support and interact with in our just daily list of tasks that we do. So with this, we talk about the different types of things that we experience. It's very important to recognize how it impacts the staff that we support, but then also ourselves and how that directly impacts leadership, retaining employees, and really growing and moving with healthcare in general. Being a part of an organization or a healthcare system, there's a lot of different things that providers across the board and multi disciplines experience. One is just acute crises, heavy injuries, things like pandemics that all cause some type of physiological, emotional, different levels of stress. Very important also to really open up our minds to know that these things affect people differently based on what they've experienced in their life. In the past, I think it has been a common conception that you leave your life at the door. When you come to work, you're here to work and you have specific things that you need to do. And over time, I've heard that change, that that's not the case. All of these past experiences are things that are a part of us, things that we adapt to and take with us. And though sometimes they feel not the best or can be seen in that negative light, they're also what make us so skilled and resilient and able to manage so many different things. That experience is vital to our character and what we bring to the table. So maintaining mental health is no longer seen as a sole responsibility of an individual employee. In the past, a lot of messages has also been related to that. Leave it at the door. You need to figure out the different things that are going on and be able to come and show up and work per your job description. Now there's been a little more of a shift where organizations hold a level of responsibility. And this is really seen through that growing support and focus by political stakeholders and also the scientific research that's coming to see that this isn't just an individual problem or situation that needs to be handled by the employee, but this is something that the organization also has responsibility over. And that directly leads us to what type of leaders are we and what do we need to do to adapt and support each other. So thinking about mental health and the workplace. Symptoms of poor mental health and negative workplace conditions have increased among healthcare workers. We steadily see that increase just based on all of the different things that life has and is presenting itself with. There is an increase also with just health workers feeling burnt out. There's a lot of data that is being gathered that support this. And one of the big things to remember is even though this is factual information, there is still something that we can do about it. And that's one of the big reasons why I've made it such a priority to be here today to learn what do we do and how do we understand it better. Leadership can make a significant impact. And it comes through our style, our communication, our understanding, and really working as a team with our staff and the organization as a whole, but then also collaboration in the community with other people who have the same initiatives. There's a higher prevalence of mental illness in healthcare. Employees can be really exposed to a variety of different working conditions. And in these working conditions, there's an increased workload, and there's also very clear evident short staff, which just adds to the burnout and adds to the difficulty in managing the day-to-day responsibility. Another thing that has also come up in studies is just showing that there is a difference between an effort and reward imbalance. So if we really think about our interactions, the amount of effort that we choose to and we are required to provide to support our population, a lot of times the reward doesn't come or doesn't feel equal. And when we speak about reward, not only salary or compensation, but also thinking of like praise and recognition. A lot of times, if we think of our frontline workers, they are really getting those traumatic experiences from the population. And even thinking about supervisees supporting staff, you are really getting those direct messages of what this other person has gone through and not being able to support in a way that you would like to, or also to even know what happened or have any type of follow up is something that's really important to also recognize and keep in mind. Because a person is left with that unknown, and sometimes dealing with that unknown is such a heavy thing to work through and just hold with you as you go throughout your day. So thinking about just characteristics in healthcare leadership. So the healthcare sector has begun to focus more on communication, interaction, and overall leadership style. Leadership has been associated with having positive and negative effects on team members. Leadership is important in emergency situations, when things happen that are unexpected, also providing growth to current team members, team building, and then again, just really going through those daily tasks that are essential to job responsibilities. The ability to work through those and troubleshoot anything that happens is such a huge part of leadership. So getting to the main point of how do we develop leaders? How do we identify them first? One of the main things to look for is talent and really making sure that we separate talent and skill. Sometimes they're used simultaneously, but they actually are very different. So talent is just having that natural ability, something that someone is born with, and it's effortless. Um, we often think about having that natural talent when we take a look at sports, someone who is just very artistic and creative, things that just flow from them, that make other types of tasks just seem like second nature. They have that natural ability to do specific tasks, or their interests help them do that as well. Now, when we transition to skills, skill is different from talent in the form that it's the ability to use your knowledge, and with having that opportunity to practice is where you can really enhance that skill. And here's where, when we think about leadership, how important it is to really recognize that talent within our team members, because there is a lot of skills that are mandated just by the profession and the job description, that are essential to doing work. But then when we really take a different look at it and take and consider skill and talent in that combination, the possibilities are very different. So it's really that thinking out of the box. So when we think about skill, we think about our leadership style, and are we providing that opportunity to really teach and give our employees, our team members, our staff that opportunity to grow? They may have that natural ability, that talent, but if we don't provide these opportunities, then we're really missing out on that growth and really providing that type of service that will extend to our patients. Along with talent and skill, one of the things that is critical is thinking about the mission alignment. And this is something that could come up often when we even are creating the job description and really going through those screeners for extending interviews. We want to know, where does the person want to go? And what questions that we ask are going to give us that information. If it's through role play, if it's through um, past experiences they had that really display what their skill set is, and also those things that they, areas that they need additional support for growth. Not only do we want to know where this potential new hire, or even if we're taking on a new position, people who have worked with the company for a while, maybe their interests and mission and where they're going has changed, just like it has for so many in the past few years. So we have that either new hire, that current employee or staff member. We have the mission of the organization, and then we also have our internal mission and how we like to do things and our leadership style. So that is something that is extremely important when identifying talent, skills, and mission alignment. Along with mission alignment, one of the, or actually, I guess it's a bigger theme that I'm seeing coming up with intrinsic motivation and the connection with a growth mindset. So, intrinsic motivation is that internal satisfaction, kind of related to talent, that internal, just natural essence of a person. Intrinsic motivation is when a person is just naturally driven to do something because it makes them feel good. Those are the questions that we really want to tap into to get a better understanding of where are we going? Are we on the same page? And are we all in alignment with the mission of the organization? That internal satisfaction really fuels the person in tapping into the reason for why they're doing things. But then it's also important for us as leaders to really empower them, to strengthen their skill set, to inspire that growth, and to really, really focus on that connection with the team that we have so that we can work together, not only within our specific team, but across multi-disciplines. So, as I referenced earlier, really thinking about that opportunity. That opportunity is critical to provide that ability for this team member to practice, to learn. And that's where growth mindset comes in. Someone with a growth mindset has that acceptance that with new challenges, setbacks are going to be a part of that. That flexibility with their in their mind that learning new things, there's going to be errors. It's going to be a journey, and accepting that that is part of the process and it's going to be very likely a part of their role. I don't know if many of you have had those experiences where you can think of a staff member or an employee that is a little more maybe set and this is the way that things have to be, or this is how they are and things won't change, or I'm not able to do this. That is a really good example of assessing that growth mindset and getting a better idea of the type of level of support that you can provide as a leader to really help them see what the possibilities are. So, intrinsic motivation, that natural satisfaction that comes with doing something that doesn't depend on those external rewards or consequences. They're doing it because it feels good to do it. And then also that growth mindset connection of understanding that this could potentially not be easy and there's going to be a lot of obstacles, but trusting that that's part of the process. Then, as a leader, being able to really come in and see and understand that better based on this person's learning style. All right, getting into training mental health leaders. So, we've just talked about how to identify these different parts that make a difference in actually how you're going to think about training. What are the critical pieces here? So, thinking about socialization and culture, again, coming back to really creating that opportunity for people to have space to process, to brainstorm, to connect with each other, and also to receive that feedback. In our mental health world, a lot of times there's not enough time to get everything done. And it's so easy to get so into the workload and what needs to be done, what has to be done. So reprioritizing all the time, especially with these crises that we spoke about that are a lot of times unexpected. So really making that time and setting the time aside, saying this is important and it needs to be done in order to invest in leadership and to make sure that we're all aligned and going in the same direction. Meeting with leaders outside of the discipline. So that whole holistic multidiscipline approach is also very important, especially when we talk about FQHCs or community organizations. Sometimes it's really easy to forget that many of us are doing this work with the same intention. We want to be helpful. We want to provide access to care and quality care. But sometimes we get so into the culture and the way that we do things that we lose that collaboration and that rich resource of really consulting and brainstorming with other organizations and the way that they do things. Creating those opportunities to encourage growth within the team, but then also outside, thinking about that bigger system, not only the department, not only the other organizations, but really taking a look at all of the possibilities that there are. using that combination of individual and team-based tasks because both of them really present with a lot of opportunities. Training mental health leaders, stressing again that practice and the implementation. There have been so many times where um, I would I think a lot of people get kind of wrapped up in the orientation, the onboarding, great information, a lot of time and dedication go into these materials. But a lot of times that follow through also gets lost because of the type of work that we do. So thinking about how am I utilizing my team and investing in them since we're all working toward the same mission. And that really comes to different ideas of like delegating tasks and projects. A lot of things, if you are a current leader, come tasked to you, maybe by default because of your role in the organization. But thinking, am I really able to take the time and dedication that I need to do this? Or is this an activity or a task that someone on my team could really benefit from? One, feeling that they have a voice and that you've identified them, or that this is a skill that they can benefit from having some additional growth with, and thinking of how you strengthen not only your leadership skills by doing things like delegating and creating structure, communicating expectations, but then also trusting in your team members and helping them have more of a kind of like a say so or participation and things at a higher level. There's more investment overall when team members feel like they are an actual critical, essential part of this team that helps it grow and move forward. With that, it's very, very important to really see your team individually for who they are. And this kind of steps a little into the realm of equality, equity, things like that. We're recognizing people do have different brains. You know, with neurodivergence, there are just different ways that people think and experience the world. And neurodivergence being any brain that is different from what is considered a typical way of thinking. And in this typical way of thinking, it's the way that the world has been set up for the majority of brains to think this way. So it's a non-medical term that's used to describe people who process information differently. I specialize in neurodivergence where I support autistic ADHDers and other kind of co-occurring things such as depression, anxiety. And with this type of work, it's really enlightening to see how many differences there are and the ways that leaders can adapt the resources and support available to be able to really help this population, their skill sets shine. So thinking about the different types of learning. So auditory, more of that lecture base, and thinking back to the way that you learn best. Is it more when things are kind of spoken to you or when you're sitting and really learning all the whys of everything? Or is it that words just become kind of just too much sometimes? And it can also vary, where maybe there's some days that you'd rather know the whys and the specifics about things. And with other types of tasks, just being shown examples, modeling of how to do it is more beneficial. So it's really having that flexible mindset yourself to recognize these things in your team members, but then also with your own specific characteristics and what works well for you. And that can change on the day to day, depending on what types of things you're faced with. So just a quick review, different types of learning styles, really thinking about auditory, verbal, or linguistic, and then also thinking about those logical pieces. A little more in-depth assessing learning style, watching others, practice and implement these things? When you're creating these opportunities, is it more lecture based? Are you assigning tasks that are individual, that are group format, where the staff member has to deliver something? And what kind of structure are you providing? Are you communicating deadlines? Are you communicating expectations? Some staff members that you have will just do these things on their own and develop their own timeline because maybe they are intrinsically motivated and it's satisfying for them to deliver a certain type of work, where others it might not be. So then that is a really nice example of a different type of explanation, maybe system for structure for different learners. We have kinesthetic learners, thinking about people who need movement to focus and process, something that's also very common with ADHDers, moving away from that quiet body shows me that you're listening. This has been something that I have seen come up a lot when we think about having webinars, when we think about having meetings, where is the expectation to sit still and look into the camera? Or is someone able to have different types of supports where they can get up and walk around and have different type of movement based on their learning style and what their body needs to help them regulate and to focus on the task and the instructions? Different types of strategies that could include breaking larger projects into smaller parts, thinking about people who have that bigger picture but need a little more support with those logistical planning, organizing details in order to reach that bigger picture. On the other side of things, people that have more of a focus on the details and the pieces that are essential to tasks, but don't really have that vision of where all of this hard work is going or could lead to on a higher level. Recognizing those things about your team members or someone new that you'd like to bring into the team, how that would complement your current team. Utilizing different things like visual supports, workflows. If you're going to have a meeting, does someone prefer to have an agenda beforehand to be prepared about what is going to be discussed, to have time to process the questions that they might have as they're preparing for the meeting? And also thinking about minimizing distractions. This is a very big thing that has also come up when thinking about working from home and thinking about shared spaces for a lot of different reasons, wanting to collaborate more across multidisciplines, but then also thinking about like financial pressure with space and how the setup and flow is of your current location. Thinking about all these different things are very important with identifying your leaders, what they need, and how to support them in their growth. On the side, I just have an image here that just talks about additional learning styles. All right, thinking about communication and conflict resolution. Effective communication between health professionals and their patients is vital to the quality and impact on care. Thinking again of our day-to-day and how fast-paced things move, a lot of times our verbal or even non-verbal cues give a very different message than our intention. Thinking about how we communicate to our team members, if it's verbal or if it's, just through gestures and things like that. Patients with severe mental illness may have significant challenges with communication, and they can experience a variety of symptoms that are maybe presenting related to their concerns and their condition. And thinking not only for the population that we serve with severe mental illness, but then also thinking our teammates and the things that they have gone through and that are managing throughout the day. Thinking about that huge connection, not only for the population that we serve through our services, our clinical services, but then also thinking about patient care and the direct support we're providing to our supervisees and staff. Communication among leaders in the mental health workforce is so, so important being familiar with the different types of communication. So with this, we talk about, there's a lot of that buzz going around of what type of leader are you? What type of communication do you have? Where are your strengths? Where can you use some more support? How are you communicating when you're in a stressful situation versus on your day to day or when you're more calm? Recognizing those things about yourself, but then also in your team, because that's really going to dictate the type of tools that you need to support them. In addition to just the overall communication style, also thinking about expressive communication and receptive communication. So, expressive communication is really seen in those social interactions. It's the message that you are sharing with others. How many details are you providing? Are you providing too many details? Not enough details? Is the other person receiving the message that you're expressing? Whereas receptive is more, are you receiving the message from others? So expressive, what message are you giving? Is it being received by the other party? Receptive, what are you taking in? Thinking, what is the best way that you take in receptive information? Is it through verbal information? Is it through written? Or is it through more of that modeling or gestural? So verbal being more speech or writing versus nonverbal. So just thinking about all these different elements that go into communication. And we're communicating all the time. And just thinking about situations where we maybe communicate with staff that we need them to communicate better. Well, just based on these examples, there's lots of different elements to communication. So by communicating better or improving communication, what does that really mean? And how does it vary across team members in leadership, um, new team members that could potentially be coming on and adding to the team, and really thinking about that style for everyone individually, but then also as a whole as a team. All right, on to measuring performance. So measuring performance, this is something that can really be seen in just the cohesion of your team, really thinking about your leadership skills and what you have done to really help them shine and really provide that opportunity to see where they are. So really taking a look at your team engagement. What type of opportunities are you providing for a team to really get to know each other, to trust in each other, and to really work through that conflict resolution? Is this something that is a high priority for you? Is this something that it's not so high as a priority because all of those other things that we've mentioned that the team is kind of figuring out on its own? And when so much time goes by and teams have certain expectations from their leaders and they're not being met, then what message are we sharing? What are we sending with them of how important their well-being or these problems are? So really thinking about your team right now or your future team, what message do you want to convey? What are your values within that position? What would be important things that need to be done, be it workflows, guidelines, things like that, that are really going to create that cohesion among your team where they feel comfortable asking for help, sharing that something is not working for them or that they have concerns about certain things. And with the healthcare sector, this is something that is very important, not only within the team and how they work together, but then also bringing on that huge layer of severe mental illness and the population that we serve. For a lot of us, there is specific training and specific protocols that we have to follow that are just mandated by our position and our licensing. With that is also all the other things that come into play. And how do we kind of like blend that together and make both a priority? One of the other things that kind of came up while I was looking through things in the research is a study that had shared that there's a lot of information that has come to light where a lot of providers feel that this is my job, this is my role, and I am fulfilling my requirements. So communication and leadership and things like that don't really feel like it's a part of what I need to do or change or adapt. And that I can see that through just all these requirements through licensing and things like that. We already have so many demands and things that we have to adhere to, but really bringing it back to that mission and that vision about things and where we want to go with this together as teammates. It's important to really give team members that voice, to really see their skills, to really see where they can benefit from more growth, see where they want to go, and really communicate the important and asset that they bring to the team. And as a leader, that is one of the things that is very important and distinguishes a leader from a manager. So, thinking a little more about that distinction, a manager is someone who make sure that rules are followed and that things are being done, more of that kind of like structural administrative role. Whereas a leader is a person who really develops that relationship with the person and can pull and see the skills and growth needed to really develop that individual and to really see them excel and create that opportunity for them if the mission is aligned to really enhance their team. So just one way to look at leadership, very different than manager. So there's a lot of overlapping qualities, but one of the distinction is that you have the ability to really lead and take your team where you'd like them to go based on seeing them individually, but then also collectively as a group. Measuring performance. So thinking a little more about just that structure, tools, and strategies. What can we use to do this? We know that as a leader, I can take a look at my team and I can kind of measure how well I'm doing, where I need more work, where I can invest more time and create more opportunity. But there are also tools and strategies that you can use to assess performance and really increase that structure. So, thinking about when you have just your one on one meetings, when you have clinical supervision, team meetings, updates that you're providing about status of productivity, all those other kind of requirements that come with the role. And not to mention also like patient satisfaction and things like that to really understand, are we providing the best type of quality care that we can? Or are we more so just kind of reprioritizing and getting through the day with providing what we could? Very big difference there. So thinking about the utilization of check-in templates, some type of structure, especially for our learners who want to know what is going to be asked of me, what is going to be reviewed during this meeting, how much time is it going to take? Having these check-in templates beforehand, or even just that expectation that this is how our meetings are going to go. I think there's been probably a variety of ways that supervisors kind of go through these meetings. Some people have their own very distinct system. Others are a little more kind of go with the flow. Hey, how's it going? Tell me what's been going on. Do you have any questions? Thinking if we ask those open-ended questions to someone who has a different kind of brain, those questions might be very overwhelming. Those open-ended questions of how are things going, you might get one of those one-word answers like good, everything's fine. Whereas if we speak about something specifically where the person knows ahead of time and has that ability to prepare, then we can get a lot more conversation out of that and an enriching one-on-one meeting. Same having to do with that follow up and that time to process and to be able to reach out with any other questions or thoughts that come after that initial meeting. Thinking about the meeting structure. the format that incorporates different learning styles and shared responsibilities? Is it through Zoom? Is it through the computer? Is it in person? Is there a hybrid type of way to meet that really could take into account all the different learning styles that are on your team? Thinking about priority organizer in terms of what's a priority to me might be a very different on the list for my team members or even other leadership. So really discussing how do we determine what the priorities are, still with working toward the mission of reaching our goals. Some people might need a little more information of why this is a priority or why this isn't, but still understanding that it's still important and their concerns will be addressed and handled. But this is why we're choosing to go this way right now, or even knowing that we will come back to that. Something that's very important as leaders to make sure that our team knows that. Also thinking about those other things that we talked about with timeline and just task delegation.
So thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. I feel like a lot of these principles, I have applied them in my own opportunity to oversight people. But before I shift into Q&A, I want to take a quick moment and let everyone know that SMI Advisor is available from your mobile device. Use the SMI Advisor app to access resources, education, upcoming events, complete mental health rating scales, even submit questions directly to our team of SMI experts. It's as easy as downloading the app. The app is smiadvisor.org/app. So it's really simple. So now I'm going to get into some Q&A. I have a lineup of questions, and I totally agree how you started the presentation, April, when we were talking about the organization's responsibility to make sure that the employees are doing well. And I kind of agree with that motto. In my previous roles, my job was to make sure that the team members were doing well and have really good structures in place to make sure that they're providing really good care for the members, the patient, however we address the people we serve. So the first question for you, in your experience, how do we advocate to ensure that our team members are getting a really good balance of doing the work, but also having the opportunity to be free when they go home, having that work-life balance?
Great question. I think that is definitely directly related to leadership. So, one, as a leader, you are modeling what is acceptable, what is okay, what is not okay. And even if you don't specifically say it, you are showing them what the expectations are. If you're sending emails to your team members after work hours, then you're communicating that there's some type of expectation to either see it or answer or respond. I think having those clear boundaries that you decide as a leader, what type of leader am I going to be? What is going to be the priority? And how am I going to communicate these expectations to everyone? That's something that has definitely come up in previous work experiences. I would receive emails all the time, all night, over the weekend. And even though I didn't directly reply to them, it just kind of sits on you and it's in the back of your mind. So something very different that has happened as I've continued to grow in leadership is making that a priority and communicating to everyone like, this is not okay. This is not what we do. And when someone, what I've seen is the team will call me out like, hey, it's a little late and you're sending this email. What's going on? Where we have that accountability with each other. And that's where that trust and communication really comes in. So taking the time to really think about it, decide what is the priority in being a leadership and communicating that message to everyone.
Yeah, it's leading by example pretty much, and making sure that you're managing down, but also have the opportunity to speak to your own supervisor to make sure you're impacting the culture as a whole, right? In general.
Exactly.
And then the other question, you spoke about this integration between many different disciplines. How do you actually facilitate or encourage leaders to start talking with if you're a behavioral health provider, talking with a medical provider, including case management, and making sure that everyone's aligned with the mission and everyone has sensitivity for the discipline that they represent. Because oftentimes in certain settings, one specialty has a little more, I guess, bulk, like, oh, medical providers are number one and behavioral health can come across as number two or vice versa. How do you encourage that form of integration? What is your strategy around that?
Another great question. I've had a lot of experience working across multidisciplines. Right now, working in an FQHC where medical providers, psych, PCPs, but then also just working with neurodivergence, working closely with OT, speech therapists, early intervention, psychiatrists, social workers. And I think it really comes down to having that respect for the other disciplines and recognizing that we're all working toward the same thing. We're all trying to support this patient, and all of these parts are very important, but the patient is a whole. So when someone comes into my office and they're talking about one thing, I have to also recognize that all these other pieces and disciplines are very important part of where they want to go in the presenting concern. So in terms of leadership and team and how do we facilitate that and communicate that, one is that alignment with the mission, making sure that others have that investment in understanding. Um, Making the time to be able to do that for consultation, which is a lot harder than it sounds, but those of you who are in the field definitely know that time gets away. So really prioritizing the importance of that. The other thing too is adapting as much as we can those requirements that we have to adhere by. Thinking about screeners, thinking about intake process, thinking about all of those different types of things and adapting it in the way of the learning style of the patient.
Mm-hmm.
One example is that someone brought up to me, like, well, how do I do this screener? And being creative with still asking that in the way that fits the needs. Oh, I have to do all these things, so I can't make sure that my person has a primary care provider, but really explaining that holistic approach. If I'm working on anxiety and my patient hasn't seen a provider in 2 years, then is it better that I get all my therapy information in those 3 minutes, or that I take those 3 minutes to really help them get connected with a primary care provider so that we can rule out any other medical things that might be more of a primary concern. So really taking a look at the whole person.
Yeah. I like your approach because you're basically bringing up the concern of someone you saw and you're bringing it up to the awareness of the other provider, and directly you're creating collaboration. So that's direct. And then directly, maybe having conversations about how your practices align and how may they be different but still complementary. That's fantastic. So I'm going to follow your line of thinking when it comes to assessment. How do you help someone understand and kind of own their own learning style? Because I've been doing work in this field for a long time, and oftentimes we have a lot to do and very little time to help people develop, which should be the other way around. So my inclination is like, how do I help someone understand how they learn best and how can I foster that for them?
Absolutely. I think this is something that is very, very, very common is that based on just what we have experienced, we don't often have that time to sit and process and to really recognize our own behavior. A lot of times we'll hear it from others, and depending on if we're open or not open to it, it could feel surprising and we can be kind of resistant to hearing that information. I think that's where that leadership really comes in, where we have that communication, we work to establish that trust, and that I can communicate, create the time to communicate, to say, hey, I've noticed this. Can you tell me more of what that means or what might be happening? I've had a lot of meetings with staff where very upset, very anxious, very all of these things. And really just having that time, making the time to sit there and say, I'm seeing this, what's going on? And just sharing my observations and them noticing and agreeing, or we're even just reflecting and taking that with them. It gives me a better idea of how they handle situations and how to better support them in the future, especially when changes are going to be happening. And giving them that feedback is so critical to helping their internal growth of realizing how they respond to different situations and
Mhm.
what they need and how to advocate for it.
Being a listening leader is going to be really important. Oftentimes, we're built to listen to respond rather than understand, and it's really important to set the foundation before that. So, within that same line, how do you move someone from being a manager per se into a leader? You see the potentials there, but oftentimes they're trained just to manage time, to manage productivity. How do you help that person shift into the ideal state, which is being a good leader?
In order to help them shift, I think first I would really take a look, and if I see that talent there, I would have the conversation because there are some people who are content with being managers and they're great at being managers. So just because someone is a good manager, it doesn't mean that they should automatically be promoted or considered for leadership because that might not be something that they want. So that's one very important piece. The other piece is if they are interested and you see these um, possibilities, have that open conversation that says, I've seen this, and that. I've also seen that you can benefit for some growth in this area, this and that, and see what that conversation kind of brings up. Because we can't make someone move or do something because then we're looking at that intrinsic motivation and things like that. But if they are open to it, um, that difference between the managerial role is going to be having a little more of that personality behind things and be able to really sit, observe, and recognize
Right.
what their managers will need.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really important. I also believe in the fact that a position or a title doesn't make you a leader. I had clinicians for many years that amazing leaders, but they love providing direct care. So I agree with what you're saying is that accentuating what they possess and allowing them to kind of grow and do that. Which
Hmm.
leads me to the next question. When you're talking about intrinsic motivation, are you saying that is basically what gets people excited to go to work? Or is there a little more that we have to do in order to identify what are those things that really motivate you to kind of like sell, move forward? And if so, is there a tool that you recommend or something we can leverage to make sure that our team has that available?
I think for me, it is that kind of like internal, natural, kind of related to like passion. What gets you up? What gets you going? What is something that you just like? You just brings you joy to do. So that intrinsic motivation being that there are, I believe, some like screeners out there and things like that that we can see. And actually, in the research, it was really interesting that link between intrinsic motivation and growth mindset. It says that a lot of the tools that are out there kind of lean a little more toward assessing like cognitive patterns, memory, things like that. And there's so many layers to that intrinsic motivation where there's a lot more research that needs to be done where with the neuroscience of things, but it
Mm.
seems like it's starting to kind of get there just to get another idea of all the elements that go into assessing what motivates you aside from memory, cognitive functioning, and those kind of natural elements.
Mhm. Yeah, really, really informative and very practical. So I have about time for like about two more questions.
Mhm.
The next question is like a follow-up on a previous line of thinking was pertaining to the expectations of conducting a training, the expectation of doing a meeting. So do you suggest that if somebody has to get up and move or if they need fidgets in their hand to kind of pay attention that that's done proactively in the expectation or allow people to kind of go with the flow as the meeting progresses? So what's your feedback around that?
For that, definitely depends on the style of the leader. Specifically to my style and just my line of work, with it just being such a huge part of what I do, I tend to have things out. have things out. If someone is just exploring it, and back to your question of what if the person doesn't know what their learning style is or haven't really had the time to think about it before, just having access to those tools and giving permission to utilize them during the meeting. Because a lot of times people will show up and just kind of think what the expectations are, and just assume I'm supposed to sit here, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. So making it just kind of like the norm, a non-judgmental space to be able to move around freely as needed. I think more and more, even in terms of patients, people are reaching out, really requesting accommodations for things like ADHD, for things like movement breaks, and just things that help them regulate with sound and communicating, work from home versus all of those. It's definitely coming, I think, up more and more. But as a leader, having those types of tools, maybe even recognizing um, and encouraging people to come to you if they have any questions about things, having that open door policy.
Yeah, that sense of having a connection before something critical happens where you can actually process and things are okay and learn from the experience in general, which is a unique ability to be a leader, not taking things personal and allowing people to, when you delegate, if they mess up, they can come back and we'll learn from the experience. There's a lot of questions in the chat about opportunities or certain tools to develop leadership, which highlights, having critical conversations, delegation, helping the person understand their strength, communication styles. Do you have resources or feedback on how certain people can start leveraging that? And also, April, how do you follow up? Because you said something really important. We give all this information and then we get mega busy and then we have a hard time following up on that. So the first question, resources, and then follow up on that.
Resources, definitely I can take a look into some things. I probably have more resources for the individual level of learning ourselves and learning what works for us. I'm sure there's things out there for sure on like the team based, so I can definitely gather those. The second question, you have to make the time. It goes with the leadership style. You have to advocate it for yourself, for your team, and say, this is critical. We need for this to happen, and I need to make the space. Because without that follow-up as a leader, sometimes it could feel like it's just like info dumping. Like, hey, great, I gave you my spiel, I brought you onto the team. Here's everything. Good luck. And so many times it's just so overwhelming with knowing the system and staff and so many different things, really making that time to check in with them, but then also to follow up on certain things and communicating those expectations that you're going to make mistakes and that's expected. Again, with that growth mindset, it's a part of the process. Please let me know how I can support, but then also checking in and making that time to do so.
Yeah. And it lines up with trauma-informed practices. Like, you're going to be consistent and predictable. And at the same time, giving the people opportunity to knock on your door, give you a call. And it doesn't lead to frustration down the line because oftentimes people don't have access to the supervisor. And when you have to have a critical conversation, it feels awkward. It should be a continuum of the care that we provide, because our title doesn't necessarily make the agency, is a complementary aspect. Everyone has an important part. So April, that's in the time that we have for question. I really appreciate everything you have offered to the field and the possibility of people learning. So move on to the next slide, please. So if there's any topic covered in this webinar that you would like to discuss with your colleagues in the mental health field, post a question or comment on the SMI Advisor discussion board. This is an easy way to network and share ideas with other people who participated in this webinar. If you have other questions about this webinar or a related topic to evidence-based care for SMI, you can get the answers you're looking for within one business day from our SMI Advisor National Experts. This service is available to all mental health clinicians, peer support specialists, administrators, or anyone else in the field of mental health who work with individuals with SMI. This is completely free and 100% confidential. Next slide. SMI Advisor offers more evidence-based guidance on staff wellness, such as creating an optimal work environment for clinicians caring for individuals with SMI. The fact sheets offer actionable steps for administrators and supervisors to create optimal work environment that fosters well-being, retention, and ultimately better care for the people who struggle with SMI. Access the resources by clicking on the link in the chat or by downloading the slides. Next slide. To claim credit for participating in today's webinar, you need to have met the required thresholds for your profession. After the webinar ends, please click continue to complete the program evaluation. The system then verifies the attendance for credit claim. This may take up to 1 hour and can be based on your local, regional, or national web traffic and the usage of the Zoom platform. Next slide. Next one. So please join us next week on June 11 as Dr. Deborah Pinos presents Staying Engaged, Working with People with SMI and Criminal Involvement. Again, this free webinar will be Tuesday, June 11 from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us today, and until next time, thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.